I'm Shane Thomas, and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined by Mike Robinson and Ken Deep, and we are here to analyse the episode Lux. And if you have any thoughts on our thoughts or anything else Doctor Who based, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. So if we just start with the episode rating for this one, Ken, what's your rating out of 10 for this?
This would be a 9 out of 10.
Okay, Mike, your rating?
No, 8 out of 10.
Okay, I'm giving it a 7, but as we'll get into, I think I may be being a little bit harsh with that rating. Mike, could you just let us know what your favourite part of this episode was?
I love a cold open. In the old days, it was kind of like, oh, I don't know if we'll ever get used to these cold opens. I love a cold open. I love a good cold open. I think it plays right to the mystery elements of the show. I think it sets everything up great. I really liked the way that this episode began. That doesn't mean to say that I thought it was all downhill after that, but I really like that idea of, I'm always fascinated by 50s sci-fi and 50 Cold War stuff in America anyway. So it quickly tapped into that, gave us this cartoon, and then all of a sudden the cartoon was out of the screen. People screamed. Just fantastic stuff. That really was a great, great start for me.
Okay, Ken, what was your favourite part of this episode?
My favorite part for this is breaking the fourth wall and meeting the Doctor Who fans. It generates a little bit of controversy. Some people don't like that. They just completely ignore the fact that Doctor Who has broken the fourth wall before, going all the way back to the 60s. It's really the creators talking to the audience. And there's fan reaction online that just got silly, like, oh, that's what Russell thinks of the fans. No, that's kind of how it is. Like, we're a group of misfits.
This is my favourite part as well. I thought this was a pretty, told an astonishing mix of metatextual commentary, snarky humour, and this is why I agree with your point, Ken, immense sentimentality, and actually a love letter to fans, all in one scene at once. That is incredibly tough to balance. That's a tough thing to do in an episode, let alone in a sequence, and I think Russell manages it. This could so easily have fallen apart. This could have been an absolute bin fire. This was such a high ceiling, low floor sequence. It could have been one of the worst sequences in Doctor Who history.
It was all risk.
Yeah, it was incredibly high risk. I mean, it has to be handled and executed with such precision and delicacy to get it right. It's not something we often associate with Russell, but he executes it with Amanda Brocci, the director, as well, and the editing and everything. But it is executed with such precision and delicacy that they get it just right. A couple of times this scene fell close to falling apart, but it always pulls away from the danger zone just in time. This is, in a way, the microcosm of the episode. This is a big swing. Lux is a big swing from RTD. And usually, when he does this, and anyone who follows on social media would have seen my initial reaction to the episode. Usually when RTD takes big swings, he misses. He loses control of his story. Russell is, by nature of his stories, good and bad, a little bit chaotic with them. I think that's by design, by the way. I think he views, I think he's kind of right, that life itself can be quite chaotic and wild and uncontrollable despite as much as we try and control things. And that, I think, comes through in his writing style. And he usually loses control of his stories when he does this. He didn't here. Underline your point, Ken, about some of the fans. I've seen some very, very good tweets about this, and this shows why I think the scene does work. Where one person said online, I watched it with my friend, and he was like, oh, really? They're dressed in Doctor Who merch. And then both our eyes just went down to the Beat the Meep shirt he was, in fact, wearing. I mean, someone else said the fan scene was so funny because when the Doctor and Blinn were staring at the screen, I jokingly waved and thought, wouldn't it be wild if they appeared in my living room? And then what happens? They appear in the living room with 3 fans.
They come popping
I've seen a lot of fans online saying, I wish that was me. Like, that's the point of the scene. You want to be those fans.
Right.
Because you wish that could be you in that situation. That's where the love letter bit comes in. And then obviously the bit at the end where those 3 people, whether they're real or not real, are best friends. And they became best friends because of Doctor Who. You know, not to get hyper sentimental about this, but us 3 know each other because of our fandom of Doctor Who. And because of our fandom of Doctor Who, we all contribute to a book. The Villains of Doctor Who, still available, by the way. Us 3 contribute to a book, and we know each other through that. Otherwise, we wouldn't know each other at all.
Yeah, that's entirely the case. And we sometimes have short memories. I mean, this is a guy who did Love and Monsters.
Yes, that's a very good point.
That was a sort of love letter to
It
the
was.
fans
It was-
in sort of the group setting. Like, and we formed a band. I've actually seen that happen in my Doctor Who group, just like I've seen 3 people gather around a television to watch Doctor Who on a Saturday night. It's not unusual.
I mean, I hate that episode. I think Love and Monsters is a garbage episode, but it is a love letter to fandom. My issue is with the execution of the story, not the story itself. But yes, 100%. This is in some ways a bit of a companion piece to Love and Monsters.
But superior,
Oh, God,
because this really can only happen because of the whole Disney thing. And I'm not talking just maybe additional money, resources, technology, but it suits exactly what they're doing right now, which is capturing a Disney audience. It's got that Who Framed Roger Rabbit vibe,
I would recommend, I won't go into it because obviously it's too long, but the TV critic Darren Mooney has written about this episode. I would recommend do some Googling or go find the social. Go and look up his review of this episode. He writes really well about it in regards to what you just said. And also actually how it does align with previous eras of Doctor Who going all the way back to the first Doctor. Aspects of this kind of fourth wall breaking thing. I mean, the group, even the fans, like, I think there is going to be a call for put it like this, Ken. I imagine you may be doing some business with those 3, or at least some of those 3 for some of your cons, because you can imagine there being Big Finish stuff about them, or people writing their own fanfic about those fans.
That would be great.
It's there.
Wow, are you guys going to be mad when you ask me my least favorite part?
Yeah, no, that's good. We'll get to that because it's good that we have a broad viewpoint of that scene. Another reason why I did like it so much is that I can't remember which character. Is it Robin, the one wearing the Beat the Meat t-shirt? Every group of fans has that one cynical fan who never appears to like anything. This goes much further than Doctor Who. This is like Doctor Who. This is Star Trek. This is like James Bond. This is everything. This is sports fandom. This is everything. One person why do you keep watching this? Because you seem to never like it. You just spend your time complaining and doing nothing else. I mean, I suspect Russell has wanted to do a scene like this for years. In fact, not just him. I'm sure Moffat has this written on a doc somewhere. I'm sure Chris Chibnall has written a doc somewhere. Other people who've written for the show have had this idea. I think it broadens and stretches what an episode can be. And you have also the kind of the meat and potatoes of that scene working is the performances are good. The performances of those 3 actors, I'd never seen them in anything before. But I think those performances really work. They're totally believable. I don't know if they're real fans or not. But at no point did I question or did it come off as false. They play all the right notes. And the various types of Doctor Who fandom. It plays, one of these theories that have been going on for a while now is Russell's big reveal that the Doctor's going to realise he's in a TV show, and this scene seems to be playing with that. And I think maybe quashing that notion of the Doctor thinking he's actually in a TV show, this is why he's breaking the fourth wall. On a meta level, Russell's playing with the rules and conventions of television itself. The undertones of that are even more interesting because this is in an industry that, and we spoke about this in our preview of the series, that is potentially dying, television itself. You then have the rumours of, is this even a dying show? Mrs. Flood showing up at the end, limited run only, May 24th, obviously ongoing rumours about, well, we don't really get into that too much. There may be plenty of opportunities to do that in the future, but is this going to be the end of the line for the show? And this is where we'll get into, obviously, to your feelings of this in a bit, Mike, but this is maybe where I think there is the dividing line between those who liked it and those who didn't, because it has been quite polarizing to a degree. It is narratively incoherent in terms of cause and effect, something leading to another thing that causes this to happen, the basics of screenwriting, fiction writing. It doesn't actually make total sense, particularly the scene at the end credits. But what it is, and why I think it works, is that emotionally, it's incredibly coherent. And in the world of genre fiction, you don't always need to be narratively coherent if you can be emotionally coherent. If you bypass the logical part of your brain, says that doesn't make sense, and it hits the pleasure centers, then that actually often emotionally coherence actually will supersede narrative coherence if you get the emotional valence right. But that's not easy to do, because when we talk about all these things, and this is what we're doing here, what really matters is how it made us feel, whether it made us feel good or not. And I think why the people who like this is that scene actually made me feel real good. It gave me a lot of joy watching it. I got so much joy from that scene. I know I'll go back and watch it again. And it does have some narrative utility.
I just wish it had happened in a slightly different spot, in a slightly different way. One of the things that I study is fans and fandom. And we have a lot of fun in my media criticism class looking at images of fans. And so one of the things I like about this is that it often shows will be very negative about their own fans. So there's the legendary Saturday Night Live skit.
Before I answer any more questions, there's something I wanted to say. Having received all your letters over the years, and I've spoken to many of you, and some of you have traveled, hundreds of miles to be here, I'd just like to say, get a life, will you, people? I mean, for crying out loud, it's just a TV show. I mean, look at you. Look at the way you're dressed. You've turned an enjoyable little job that I did as a lark for a few years into a colossal waste of time.
So I liked that these characters weren't stereotyped. I just felt like the pacing of it just ground to a halt there. It was fun. It was interesting. I liked when they argued about Blink. But to me, it just, like, the brakes were suddenly on. And that's the moment when I really felt like, are they going to die? Are they trapped in this screen? Is there any existential fear? Or, oh, we're going to step out here and have a little bit of fun. I'm not sure where I would have put it. I'm not sure where it should have happened. But happening the way it did in between some other things bothered me. And I think the other thing that troubled me about it was I would have liked a little more ambiguity. I would like for us to have walked away from that. I mean, I think you get this really great sense of, oh no, are these characters going to die? And Doctor Who is, legendary for that, infamous for that. Here are some neat characters you meet very quickly, start to like, they're dead. So that was interesting to me, but it just stalled at that moment. And all of the pace and all of the excitement and all of the thought of, here this terrible god that has to be defeated felt a similar way back in the Maestro episode, where it was kind of like, and now here's the Beatles for a few moments, which sort of matter to the plot, but maybe aren't as crucial or essential. So, I totally get what you all are saying, and I totally get the excitement of it, and I'm very grateful that they really didn't make fun of fandom. And it did have, like you said, Shane, it was a very real sense, but it just felt like my foot had come off the pedals. You know what I mean? Like everything was zooming along, and then all of a sudden, well, let's pause to do this. And then I'm not sure that it really picked that pace up and that urgency up quite as well. And I know that's a strange thing to say, considering that we escaped and went into a near-death scene, but it just was kind of too much of a break, I guess, for me.
So, let me do my last point, and I'll follow up and immediately transition into Lee's favourite part, because obviously we just had yours. What I thought the scene actually does at the end, where it does fold back in the narrative, is the Doctor and Belinda are actually quite upset when it looks like these three fans are going to die, and the Doctor gives Belinda a reassuring hug, a comforting hug, and that in turn, and this has been happening throughout the episode anyway, cement the bond between these two as Doctor and companion. So the experience they have with these three fans actually also brings them closer together. And also, I believe Belinda then says right after that, the fans are right, you have to try and fight to beat this Lux Imperator. So my follow-up question to you, and then I will ask Ken his least favourite part, is, so is part of your problem almost not the scene in and of itself? As a scene, it works fine, but it is an aside, and it is we are out of the imminent threat of Lux has trapped them in this film. How do they get in this film? They're cartoons. Then they become more three-dimensional. They're trying to rip the frame down again and again and again. That don't work. You have the threat of peril. And then in this scene, they are technically still in peril, but the peril seems to have gone. It's very Russell core. It's very British core of what are we doing? We're sitting around on the sofa in front of the TV having a cup of tea. And so in that moment, it's actually quite comforting and slow, and we're not in the middle of the threat that they're faced with, even though they are still faced with that threat.
It's the idea that it's, like you said, an aside. So this might be a big deal for Doctor Who, but this game gets played a lot in a lot of other areas of fiction, and sometimes it can go quite well, and sometimes it's a little painful. There are great old comic books, for example, where the writer of the story is suddenly germane to the plot and must help the Justice League or Superman or whoever save the day by providing that inspiration. That pacing break just stalled there for me. It was like you were supposed to hit the gas of the car to merge out onto the highway, and when you hit it, your car just didn't quite take off like it should have. I totally agree. It really does add a wonderful human element. It really is a love letter to the fans. It's just where it is, and I'm not sure where else it could be, but it's where it is that really kind of bugged me.
It's strange, though, Mike, because I think this was Russell's starting point. I think he started with that scene and then...
tried to get there?
And tried to get there. Like, how do I make this work? Well, I have to create a fiction in order for this to happen. And this has to be that sort of land of fiction kind of thing. If it was happening in the real world, there's no way it would work. If this was Blink, it wouldn't work.
Right. To me, it just is not there in the way it needs to go. I really kind of hope that it's not his starting point. I kind of thought the whole device was for Belinda and the Doctor to come together, that moment where they become more dimensional. Really, to me, was kind of like the bigger moment. It just stalled. I find the latter half of this to just be a little flat in general. It's kind of like maybe that fourth dimensional threat should have led up to something else, or maybe that should have been the last thing. I don't know, but it's like being on a roller coaster, and the best part was in the middle rather than sort of out somewhere where it should be. So it just, I don't know, just doesn't pace out for me. It's not a terrible Crisis. It's not anything, gave it an 9 out of 10. Bad episode. It just, when it happened, I was kind of like, oh, geez.
So you were hoping for like an episode that would actually, in terms of its happenings and its peril, be fast-paced? Because we can all agree, it's not a fast-paced scene, this scene we're talking about at all. It is slow. It's very just people sitting around and talking.
Every episode is somebody's first episode. And I would worry that moment, somebody would be kind of like, what's this show really doing? Like, what does this show normally do? Because up until that point, it's very Doctor Who. Then it takes this brief aside, and then it chugs along. It's a little rupture that didn't charm me quite as much.
I definitely agree that if this is your first episode, it's a tricky one. And you're right that every episode is usually someone's first. I don't think the writers can write every episode as if it is someone's first, because then you're kind of locked into what you can do, just in terms of... Right, there's lots of great Doctor Who episodes that would be tough for someone's first episode, I think, to be. Okay, so Ken, if we come to your least favourite part of the episode?
The only thing I kind of thought I could do without is the Scooby-Doo references. I've always felt that in Doctor Who. I mean, they've done Scooby references once before. They've done Ghostbusters references. There's little bits of things here and there, and it's a nice tip of the cap. But that was the only thing for me that kind of seemed... And that's funny because we're talking about a episode where a cartoon comes to life, and that's the one thing that pulls me out. But I think the reason is, I think this episode, tell me if you think I'm on the mark with this. It's something you said earlier, Shane. Do you feel this episode or do you think it? You know what I mean? If you're in there for the ride, like you say, let's just picture it as a roller coaster. You go on it and you're just enjoying the ride, and then you analyze it when you get off. That's kind of how I watch it, unless something pulls me out. And I went along with this, in a very emotional ride. That's what I looked at Doctor Who as an escape. A little escapism. Sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's lighthearted. But I'm really just looking to forget about my actual life for a little while. And that's exactly what this episode did. And how it achieves it is by tugging the heartstrings a bit and, just not taking itself too seriously.
I mean, I see what you're saying with the Scooby-Doo thing. Part of the reason that it didn't bother me at all is for the specific reason that this Doctor referred to himself as Velma.
Yeah.
And I cannot think of a Doctor of our 15 that we know of more appropriate, well, I guess 16 if you include John Hurt, a Doctor who's more appropriate to describe himself as Velma than this one. It's a line from the trailer as well, and you're just like, yeah, that tracks. So my least favourite is not a massive thing. It's talking about like pacing and stuff, the action conclusion where Reginald Pye helps Belinda save the Doctor. So the idea is fine. Reginald is essentially locked. He's been in the cinema for Lord knows how long. He's locked in a prison of his own grief because his wife has passed away. And he's in the cinema. He stays in the cinema, has some version of his wife back. And in order to save the Doctor, he's got to let her go. All again, totally fine. It all got resolved very quickly. I do suspect there was a lot more that went on the cutting room floor to fit inside the, I think, 45 minutes or so this episode length was. He's got the door locked. Belinda can't get in. She's begging him to open the door. His wife appears in a vision. And then it's like, all right then. Like, he doesn't even say, we don't even seem to say goodbye or anything or any kind of conversation. I suspect some stuff was written and filmed, but we don't see it, so it doesn't matter. It was just like, okay, fine, I'll take care of it and I'll sacrifice myself. The incidents are fine. The way they were put together, the pacing and order of them, I thought were not. And part of the reason why this stuck out is that, similar to last week with the Robot Revolution, another episode I liked, the big action conclusion of the dispatching of our villain, narratively and visually, I thought was executed. It was very ordinary. The actual execution, it felt undercooked more than anything else. A little bit rushed, a little bit not forced, but okay, this, without any of the emotion that knits it all together so that you're feeling what happens rather than just observing it. And this is 2 in 2 weeks. I kind of hope this isn't a trend. Might be something to keep an eye on. It's not a massive problem. Still really like this, but when I had to find a least favorite part, that's the thing that stuck out the most. Okay, next thing, I come to you, Ken. This is part of the reason I'm glad to have 2 Americans on, because this episode is set in America, and I feel a very specific, obviously neither you, I think, before around then, but it is your country, a specific time in America where, and you even see it in the costumes and stuff, that globally, when you think of how America exports itself to the world, there's a vision and a mode of America that you imagine is going to be depicted if you're set in the 1950s. I'm just going to come to you first, Ken, and then you, Mike, on what about America kind of, or how they were depicting America really stood out about this, and I mean good and bad. What do they get right? What do they get wrong? If I come to you first on that, Ken.
I was told that it's Miami, and glad they addressed certain issues about the doctor's skin color. They don't gloss over it, but they also don't, because you could make a whole episode on racism, and they have in the past. That wasn't what this episode is about, but you still have to address it. This is a case of the setting. This is a little bit less is more. They're not spending their time convincing you it's the 50s. It's a much smaller, tighter space to do this in. It's really just the theater and the exterior immediately outside the theater. You know, we don't go through Miami. We don't take a car chase through Miami or anything like that. So all of that worked for me pretty well, because this aesthetic is something that is romanticized in America all the time, right down to our current president's desire to go back to something when he says again. This is what he's talking about. He's talking about this time, post-war America, the boom, the Heath dividend, all those kind of things. However, casually glossing over the racism and the other issues that we still had. That's pretty much it for the Americana.
Americana is a better word for it. That's what I kind of mean when I say, I mean Americana rather than America, because America is a geographical place full of lots of rich and complicated and good and bad histories. Americana is a very specific type of like flavor or something. So that's probably a better description of what I'm looking for here, Mike.
To me, it's idealized. It doesn't feel like Miami because it kind of feels like everywhere, if that makes sense. To me, I kind of wish they just called it somewhere other than Miami, because to be Miami and to not have certain feels of that city almost strikes me as a little strange. I'm going to make a segue here. There was another British show that was set in Miami years ago. And my very good friend Tim Winkle and I are the world's only published authors on this show. And this show used to be called S Club 7 here, right? I think over there.
Good God. Yeah, I remember this show.
Miami 7.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so our paper was The Innocents Abroad, S Club 7's America. And what we talked about in this project.
Sorry, just quickly. So, sorry, was this a book or like just an academic thesis?
It was a journal article. And I can't remember the journal that it's in. Popular Music, Journal of Popular Music, I believe is what it was. Journal article. We wrote this article as an excuse for me to come to England, and we ended up getting it published in a journal. What was really fascinating to us was that we so rarely get to see America from somebody else's perspective. A lot of times, for good or for bad, America projects its images of itself out to the world and potentially overwhelms them, right? You know, part of that is the size of our industry here and the capacity of our industry. There are other places that can match that, maybe China, India, but for sheer capacity, America puts out a lot more entertainment than it takes in. My friend Tim that wrote this article with me was living in England at the time. Tim always knew what was going on with our shows here in the States because he was getting those shows. Whereas some of the things he was watching, I was like, oh, I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is. in general, as Club 7, the series' attitude towards America was, well, these are really fun, interesting people, and they're there to kind of consume our music and be happy and excited about it. And they actually, if you are deep on S Club 7 lore, they actually have a special where they go back in time to the 50s. And it's kind of funny because all kinds of things happen in the episode where it would be like, well, they would have never allowed that to happen. Bradley would never have been welcomed there. Although, the women are wearing far less clothing than they would have been allowed to wear. But because Americans are wonderful and S Club 7 liked them, everybody was just ready to accept the music and dance and have fun and a good time. So I really like seeing when a show looks at America, and this is not the first time that Doctor Who's done this, but it was really getting into an era that I find really fascinating. And I think what it got was a lot of the items that you would cherry pick right out. Oh, nuclear bombs. Oh, here's a mention of Cuba. Oh, here's, this coffee diner. Here's these things. And it grabbed them and it put them together in a really fun way. And the idea that somehow that newsreel shot of A-bombs going off, something that Americans were seeing, and I wasn't there, but that's what America was looking at and seeing all those things, and this kind of flip side to this era of glitz and progress and excitement. And then, like you mentioned, the episode does get a few things in there. Oh, this theater is segregated. Oh, they really couldn't have sat in this coffee house. It maybe doesn't get at it quite the way that the Rosa episode did a few years back for Jodie Whittaker, but it still gets at that material. So I liked that a little bit because it was almost like the Doctor and Belinda were cosplaying to a 50s ball. Oh, let's change our clothes. Here's Roller Beethoven. Let's run on out and go out and have fun in 52. And then they found out, well, maybe 52 isn't as great as we thought it was. And Belinda's trying to get out of 52, then realizes we have to stay and help 1952. And then they're ready and off and going. So is it the most complicated dissection of American ideology in the 1950s? No. But it's kind of this playful, loving mix of imagery and ideas and style. I really liked the fact that Mr. Ringading was a 30s cartoon in a 50s setting. So this idea that he's kind of like this old cartoon from an older era. My father used to tell me about going to the movies as a kid, and they couldn't wait for the cartoons. And then when the cartoons would start, if they were the old cartoons that looked like Mr. Ringading, they were always kind of like, oh, expletive, now people are going to sing, So it was kind of fun that they played with that and referenced trickster figures, things like that. You had characters that were doing everything they could to break the fourth wall, Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig. I kind of wondered why Disney didn't put in some of their own stuff. Maybe they just didn't want to get the IP all mixed up. Maybe they didn't want to have some rights issue later on. But I thought it was like a 1950s sampler. In many ways, I keep thinking about this as like a Disney lot experience. And it really is the kind of thing that if there was 1950s land, that's what you would find. People walking around just like that. That's what you would find. These kinds of things playing. That sort of thing happening. So to me, it was Americana on display, questioned a little bit, but maybe not as deeply as it could have been.
Cosplay, I think, is a good word for it. I mean, it is, yes, almost like a theme park version of 50s America from the perspective of someone who's not American. But I think that's part of the point. I don't think it's meant to be. Like, if you're looking for, you were trying to give your students, Mike, about, here's what 50s America was like, you would not show them this episode.
Yeah, I always show, I show Rosa. When we do our Doctor Who week, that one goes over fairly well. That 50s is more informative.
I agree definitely what you're saying, and that's exactly, again, why I was hoping to get an American viewpoint on this, because it would give us a lot more depth and understanding than you can get from elsewhere. Like in my notes I have, Cold War, nuclear panic. One thing I thought was interesting on the newsreel was the person doing the voiceover talking about the atom bomb, says it's the pinnacle of man's creative genius. And I thought that's interesting that it feels accurate, but interesting that you would refer to a tool of such vast destruction as the pinnacle of humankind. It does feel
for that time,
believable, incredible. Also, one question for you both. Obviously, we're in America. We have a lot of characters. None of these people are actual Americans. The accents. Well, how good were the accents?
It didn't pull me out.
I never knew Linus Roach wasn't American. The guy that played Mr. Pye, is he English?
Fairly certain none of these actors are American.
We always liked him on Law & Order. He was Batman's dad, so I always thought he had a fantastic American accent. And gosh, I feel I've broken through the fourth wall now, Shane. I don't even know where I am anymore. That one was pretty good. Logan was at the kid at the diner. I don't know if he was great, but yeah, by and large, they sounded about right to me.
Yeah, actually, his accent is very much what a 1952 movie actor would sound like. His cadences and things, that sort of snappy style. Or they used to have a way of talking that's just so weird. Like, did people actually talk like that back then? Based on the movies.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking now the first Back to the Future when Marty goes back to the 1950s and you think of all those characters that he meets. Yeah. Everything about them, clothes, fashion, speech.
Yeah, attitudes.
Yeah, I thought it was quite good. It'd be the kind of accents you get when if you go and see a play in London and the play is based on something American. So I've seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, for example, a version of it in London. Some of the actors you would actually recognise from stuff, but they are from the UK, they're not American. And so with some of the American accents, some of them are like, they're not great, but for some reason on the theatre at least, you let it go. You're not really bothered that much. Where in TV, on screen, we tend to be a bit more harsh when we judge the accuracy of someone's accent. I mean, I felt confident saying this. When I think of the accents in this, and then the accents in Dialects in Manhattan, I feel that these ones are much superior.
I mean, obviously my world is completely rocked, and I have to go find Linus Roche and how he nearly sounds.
Okay, if we move now, Ken, just to observations of stuff we haven't mentioned yet.
Kind of goes part and parcel with your question about the MVP for the episode, because probably my biggest observation had to do with Alan Cumming and just the absolutely brilliant job he did in voice acting the part, because I think that's what sells me on this. There's a depth the whole point of the character is that he's trying to become deeper, right? He goes, I'm just a two-dimensional thing, and then he's trying to become deeper and deeper. In the episode, when he's not all consumed by this god, he just wants to live. Like the underlying shallow cartoon character just wants to continue to live. And there's these wonderful moments, and it's all through that incredible voice work that he's sympathetic. He's the villain of the piece. And we watch him go off into the sky, and you're still moved by it. You're still moved by it. He's just trying to find some inner peace in it. It was really, really good. It pulls the heartstrings.
Usually when you're cosmically inflated like that in science fiction, or there's a lot of comic book examples, you go mad or you scream and you howl, it's usually this terrible thing. And yeah, it was kind of like wonderfully transcendent, wasn't it? Like, hey, he's a bad guy and he ate those people, sort of put him on film, but it is kind of this wild moment for him. That's really good observation.
Yeah, just a little more depth than should have been in this type of story. I mean, I guess that really is the whole point of it as well, is that if Russell's saying something, there's a metaphor hidden behind this, is that there's more depth to our television characters than we sometimes give them credit for. One last thing, I love Ncuti's line, I live in it and I shine. He's talking about, what he's asked, how do you deal with these things and these prejudices and these reactions and things. And he just says, you do what we all do. We like to live, right now in America. You say, well, we're just living, we get up every day and we still have to go to work, like those kind of things sometimes don't change until they change.
Okay, Mike, you have any additional observations you're on?
I think my observations kind of slide into MVP territory here. Do you want me to just kind of bring them together?
I mean, if you've got them, if you want to leave them for MVP, we can. That's fine. The few things I have here. So the first thing, so Mrs. Flood shows up. So Anita Dobson was on set for that filming of that last line, and she was being asked about by Stephen Powell, who's the presenter, about the whole Mrs. Flood thing. Again, she said she doesn't know. Obviously, that's a lie. But she said she was actually in a cinema, funnily enough, and they had a couple of it in the foyer, the lobby. There were a couple of, life-size model stormtroopers, and she said She said, "Oh, she really liked the look of them." And she said to the person working there, like how much? And the guy said, "No, so they're not for sale." And then he said, "Tell me who Mrs. Flood is, and they're yours." And she's like, "Yeah, I can't do that."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's in Doctor Who Unleashed. So if you've missed it, it's mentioned in there. I mean, one thing about this, not just this episode, but last week, is that I think there was a lot of pressure that this series has to be strong. And look, if the finale doesn't work, that's how it'll be remembered. So the series is always remembered by the finale, rightly or wrongly. It's been a good start. But the great thing about Doctor Who is that it is such an elastic show and a malleable show. It can be so many different things. Don't expect this next week. Some things we were talking about, some of the things we liked. It'll be something probably very different in tone, in energy, in how it looks, in the acting performances. Next week's part of what makes the show work so well. Very key scene after the cold open. We then go to the Doctor trying to fix the TARDIS. And that's the scene, we come in midway through. That's the scene when we realise after how episode 1 ended, he and Belinda are now actually getting to know each other. Because they're not in a dangerous situation, they're not just trying to escape, it's slowed down. Now, we don't get the whole scene, of course, but you realise they're asking about each other, as well as him trying to fix the TARDIS to get Belinda back to May 24th. And this explains throughout the episode why she's more comfortable. She's more comfortable following him. Like, they land, 1950s, and the Doctor's like, well, you want to go home, so I'll go on my own. In a tongue-in-cheek, obviously. And Belinda's like, well, no, hold on. I want to come, I want to play. That was not the Belinda of episode 1.
Yeah.
But they've had this conversation, and clearly they are a little bit more at ease at each other. Episode 1, at the end of that, she's saying, taking me home. At the end of episode 2, saying, we'll face these things together. There has been a very clear change through their experiences, as dangerous experiences would do. There's that saying, like, none of us really know, but the saying, like, in the military, that if you're in the military in war zones with people who you kind of totally different personalities and perspectives, but that kind of scenario will bring you together in a way and will forge a lifelong bond between you that almost supersedes anything. And this does lead me to think with Belinda, she's fully in the Doctor's world now. This might not end very well for her. I did like we saw this a lot in episode 1, she has a cynicism of a millennial generation. So when they're introducing each other to what they believe is Reginald, and Belinda's like, I'm Belinda, this is the Doctor, and it's like, hold on, the Doctor, really? Every time, like, yeah. And she's like, oh god, she's under her breath, ridiculous. That I do like, that's very particular type of, almost like online snark that you'd see. I think that's a nice touch for the character. Nice thing, Radha said to on her Instagram after the episode, like posting those pictures she's probably been holding on to for about a year. Her stunt double, South Asian woman, it was worth mentioning because historically that's not always been the case with stunt performers. Sometimes with a black actor, it is a white actor in black or brown face, or with a woman, it is a man with like a long hair wig. It's nice that they got a South Asian woman to stunt double for her scenes. With Mr. Ringading, I suspect we may speak about him again in a minute, but with him, another of the Pantheon of Gods, it fits very nicely in the tone. If you think of the Pantheon we've seen so far, so many of them, they come with eerie smiles and games that are very playful and cruel and nasty, willfully so. You think of the Time Maker, you think of Maestro. They all kind of are on the same almost emotional register, all of them. One thing I liked from the scene when the Doctor and Belinda are stuck in the film in their cartoons, their voice, because they're obviously not acting, but they're doing voice acting, their voices change. They sound a little bit like you would in a cartoon. They don't sound like their normal characters. It's a very important touch just to make that scene work as well. And the notion in that, honesty and sadness and vulnerability apparently gives a person depth. It's kind of Russell's message in that scene. So it seems actually a bit of a silly scene at first, like the still of them as cartoons. That's been doing the rounds before this episode even came out. So I think everyone knew this scene of some sort was coming. And it might seem like a throwaway silly scene, but it does end up forging that bond between them, just like the scene with the fans. Once they get through that, and they share with each other and they're very vulnerable with each other out of necessity. This explains why at the end of episode 2, Belinda's like, we'll face these things together.
The teasers made you think they'd be that way 15, 20 minutes of the episode. And I really like how they moved away from that quickly. That it's kind of like, oh no, they're just going to be a cartoon and do silly cartoon things for 20 minutes. But I liked how they moved past that.
It was just enough to make it fun without sticking around too long. And, the same thing could be said for the fourth wall bit with the fans. Is they didn't stick around on it. They went, they did a thing, and they moved on. And in both cases, it was just enough to make it interesting, and you look forward to, when you rewatch it, you look forward to these moments coming up, but it doesn't dwell on it where the entire episode is hanging on this gimmick,
On that scene, the animation was very good. A lot of it was done traditionally. Like one of the, I believe his name's Neil Boyle, I think. Don't quote me on that. But one of the animators for this was also part of the animation team for Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Which was very interesting because I think Ken's already mentioned Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Some people have jokingly called this episode Who Framed Doctor Who. I mean, the FX, I think, generally was very good.
Oh, yeah. Visually very impressive.
I mean, I even think, if you think of the moonlight that kind of ignites Mr. Ring-a-Ding, you get the cloud clearing, you see the moon, and the moon gets brighter and brighter, and that's obviously an effect around the edge of it to let you know that, pay attention to that moonlight. You've already mentioned it, Ken. These conversations will not stop about the utility of Disney with Doctor Who. We have gone a bit Monty Python Life of Brian, what the Romans done for us. There has been a thread of what Disney have actually done for Doctor Who. This episode is impossible without Disney money. This episode does not happen, whether you liked it or you didn't like it. This episode does not exist. And I say Disney, not that Disney are like these kind, benevolent benefactors. Had it been any stream, had it been Amazon, had it been Netflix, whoever, without the additional money, you can't do this with BBC money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not even like a cheaper version. There's no version of this episode that exists.
A cheaper version would have failed this episode entirely.
They would have known not to even bother trying.
Yeah.
The other episode I thought of, as well as Love and Monsters with this, a little bit, is The Idiot's Lantern.
Yeah.
One is dealing with cinema, one's dealing with television, one's dealing with Americana, one's, we don't really have a British phrase for it, one's dealing with a very specific time in British culture. I think this succeeds a lot more than The Idiot's Lantern does, but there were a lot of similarities. And I know Russell didn't write the episode, but that's obviously from his era. He'd have done some rewrites, I'm sure.
Aren't these historically at roughly the same time?
Yes, 50s. Even though Queen Elizabeth II is now coronated at this moment, because there is a throwaway line in the newsreel and the cold open about Queen Elizabeth II is observing, and then it fades out. But it's very much a, don't worry, British viewers, we're mentioning the Queen.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't gone full American. So yes, the Queen Elizabeth II has been coronated at this point, and yes, like you say in The Idiot's Lantern, she is about to be coronated. But you're right, it's a similar era.
Yeah.
I only saw this today, just looking at some viewpoints online today. Usage of spoons is becoming a theme. We obviously see it inadvertent or otherwise. Use of bringing Mr. Ring-a-Ding out of the screen. We saw it in Empire of Death. We saw it in fact, in the episode of Maestro, The Devil's Cord. A spoon became quite important. There's a usage of spoons that I think is probably just what it means. We will see. It's worth keeping an eye on. We saw in the trailer Mr. Ring-a-Ding coming out of the screen, and that's very much Doctor Who as the Ring. Or Ring, if you've seen the original Japanese horror movie remade in America. There's two more things. We hear the toy makers laugh. We hear it from Mr. Ring-a-Ding.
Trust me. Get back. Get away from me.
Gee willikers, you're a clever old coot. Don't spoil my surprise.
Tell me. Who are you?
Don't make me laugh, because it sounds like this.
That is beginning to occupy a similar space as the sound of drums did in Russell's first era. A oral motif, and when you hear it, it's almost like the cloister bell. It's like, well, this ain't going to be good for the Doctor.
Yeah, I made an expletive.
Yeah, that laugh, and you're just like, oh shit. And this final thing is, as we see with Mr. Ring-a-Ding at the end, he's off the board, but it's quite clear he's not dead. Russell does like to leave it open-ended for a villain, an easy way for a villain, if it's not him who writes it, someone else might, a villain to come back. So, particularly because it's animated, as long as Alan Cummings' voice still works, we may at some point see Mr. Ring-a-Ding again, or even hear him in that Big Finish audiobook. So yeah, if we come now to our MVPs for the episode, Mike, we'll start with you.
Whoever did the visuals, whoever did the animation, it's got to be a large group of people. Whoever did the cinematography, whoever did the mise-en-scène, they're just the superstars here. It's not quite the uncanny valley, but it's a similar sort of thing. You know, anything that's slightly off in a mix of modes like this, like live action and animation, if you get it too strange, the brain fixates on it. I loved the scene, and it's so innocuous when the Doctor and Belinda first come down the stairs, when they first meet Mr. Ringading, and they circle around him and just start looking and talking to him, and you realize his size and how the way he looks changes from, where the character is positioned against him. That was just brilliant. And, I wasn't aware of the Who Framed Roger Rabbit connection, but, now all that makes sense. But even moments like when they first got themselves, when the Doctor and Belinda got themselves out of the flat 2D animation into the more conventional 3D look, there's still something different about it's artificial film stock, right? They're just making it look different. There are other moments where they're on screen and it looks different. They look visually different as they're about to press and push that fourth wall out that you all enjoyed so much. There's just so many wonderful shifts, and there's so many fantastic plays like that with just light and perspective, and in an otherwise fairly simple, straightforward space. I'm not saying that theater didn't look great, it looked fantastic, but it's really just there's nothing special going on there. There's no moving parts, but they were able to really make very intriguing visuals happen. Things that were, at first maybe a little fun and then really scary. I loved when Mr. Ringading was first becoming real, how he got more horrific. He started looking more frightening, and then he was back to his old self as he expanded out to his, transcendent moment there. You're absolutely correct. That is money and expertise that maybe would not have been accessible at any other point in the history of the show.
These people are, of every episode, whether the episodes work or not, they're kind of the unsung heroes in terms of the work they have to get through. There's one thing I should have mentioned as well. The filming of this scene, the exteriors of the cinema, was during a very heavy storm in the UK. This time called Storm Jocelyn. I vaguely remember it, but London was mostly unaffected. But it hit Wales. It really disrupted some of the filming.
Wow.
The exterior shots they had to do outside the cinema. Storm Jocelyn. Google it, you'll see someone having called, and this coincided with some of the filming of the episode. So Ken, who's your episode MVP?
It's Alan Cumming. I spoke about why that was. So for me, so much of this hangs on that performance, the subtlety of his vocal performance. It can't be underestimated. It really brings that character to life. This easily could have just been a fall flat on your face kind of thing, and it works because he is fantastic.
With Doctor Who casting, sometimes you hear about people being cast, particularly certain people, and you're just very happy immediately because you're like, well, this is going to work. You're not worried at all. Sometimes someone gets cast and you don't know. Sometimes you may not even know who the actor is. But you're like, Alan Cumming is this, evil cartoon. Sign me up. You know already. You know that's going to work.
Does he do a lot of voiceover work normally, or?
I'm not entirely sure, but because he's so malleable with his voice, and because of the tone of this episode, the tone of Russell era Doctor Who, you know that he's going to be able to portray that. He's a non-American that will get it. To use the modern day vernacular, he understands the assignment. My MVP is Ncuti Gatwa. This, for my money, is his best performance to date as a Doctor, and to be honest, Daylight might be second. We mentioned the way it depicts racism in this time, and there have been a few complaints, and I get where they come from some people of colour, of the scene in the diner where the Doctor mentions that this is a segregated space, and Belinda is understandably horrified, and the Doctor kind of doesn't dismiss it, but says we can't focus on that right now, and trying to kind of draw a parallel between that and the way it's on the Shakespeare Code. I thought that was a lot worse in the Shakespeare Code, but I think the reason to understand is that it is totally normal for Belinda to act like that, but it's not abnormal for the Doctor to act the way he does, because the Doctor mediates a racism different than human beings. The Doctor is not a human being, and the Doctor's experience of racialization is not the same, despite what happened in Dot and Bubble. Part of how racism works, how it functions, and how people react to it is kind of based on how it's been deployed in the past. The Doctor did not grow up on Earth. The Doctor grew up in Gallifrey. So their reaction is not going to be identical. It can't be. And Ncuti in these moments, he is incredibly calm and incredibly still and incredibly sure of himself. One of the things that just bigotry, not just racism, does to a person, to speak from experience, is that the point is to make you not feel like a human being. And when you feel degraded in that way, it causes certain emotional reaction. Ncuti and the Doctor is not, I mean, not Ncuti Gatwa, the human being. I mean, the Doctor is not like that. The Doctor would not react the way I would react. The Doctor would not react the way Belinda would react. The Doctor is totally secure in himself. So therefore, when things are being done to him, he will not have the same initial reaction. The common feeling of, I'm being dehumanized, I have no to prove my humanity, and the Doctor's like, I ain't got to prove shit. I know who I am. It's displayed most brilliantly in what turned out to be the fake out scene with the racist police officer from the NYPD and the fake version of Tommy Lee's mother. The hands go up, and the Doctor puts his hands up second, and Belinda is understandably scared and indignant about how dare you do this to me. And she doesn't say a word. And there's almost a half grin on his face. He's calm and he's giving them a pitiable look to the people, the fake people in front of him, and also by extension a pitiable look to Lux Imperator. Like, seriously, you think I wouldn't see through this, and you think that's going to rattle me? Because the Doctor does not engage with this form of psychic violence in this way. RTD has spoken about this. He said he's been asked a lot, well, what are you going to do now going in the past where your Doctor's black? And the thing about the Doctor is the Doctor walks into almost any space like they own the place. And yes, you can't ignore the fact that this Doctor looks different. Russell has said he doesn't want to be the central feature. And I think that makes sense. No, it does not mean that the Doctor is going to be reading people for their racism and giving people verbal dressing downs. We may see it now and then. But then you have a totally different show, where the Doctor becomes in some ways unrecognizable, and every incarnation is different, but they shouldn't be totally different than the ones that came before. So I do think that's the right way to go about this. And some might disagree, that's totally fine. But I'm glad this is how they're addressing it. They're not ignoring it. They're not pretending that this Doctor doesn't have a lot of melanin in their skin, but they're not making it the distinct and determining feature of who this person is.
I agree with you that probably Ncuti's best performance out of the Doctor so far is it's really he's very strong in it. You know, he comes across with everything you want. The humor, the charm, and then the seriousness, the darker side. There's a great line that Lux has. He says, "You're the most amazing creation, my Doctor, sir. You have light within you that builds a body." And it's so much of that is the lesson of Doctor Who so often, right? Like, he's just projecting this image onto us humans, so we have something we can identify him as. And it just so happens that his skin color is darker than it used to be, or it's a female humanoid look than a male humanoid look, or whatever. It's so meaningless to a creature of light, as Lux just described, that maybe he can't wrap his head around it either. You know, like you were just saying, how he's above these petty things.
It's not that the Doctor or the show doesn't see colour, but Doctor isn't going to be defined by how other people see colour. It's like, yeah, I get you see it like this, but that ain't changing who I am, and I will not allow it to change who I am. It comes back to the line you said earlier about I shine, because the Doctor does that regardless, no matter how they look, no matter what body they inhabit. A sidebar as well, this incarnation of the Doctor has the residual memory of facing bigotry and being discriminated against when they were in the body of the 13th of Jodie Whittaker. So this also isn't, in the incarnations we've seen, this isn't a brand new thing for the Doctor to go through, even though it's something different. It's sexism, misogyny, rather than racism. But I think how it's dealt with, I really like to dealt with, because they don't ignore it. Doctor comes out the TARDIS, 1952, we got dressed up, no one could see us, and then he just a quick look at his hand, it's like, yeah, in fact, maybe 1952, maybe not the worst thing. Should we risk a coffee? This place is segregated. The fact they are around some white people, not every single white person is dripping with, like, racist hatred. Also, racism doesn't always manifest in that way anyway. So I thought how it was handled, I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it was done in a very strong way. I think Russell has really improved this was a concern of mine when he cast a black Doctor, and I think he's written black characters in the past. I think he's really gotten better at that. I think he's put work in to get better at it. He does deserve some credit for that. And what we're saying about, you know, the Doctor in some ways is the same no matter what. If you look at this Doctor, and maybe the first time I've really seen it here in this incarnation of the insatiable curiosity at the unknown. So when they think the movie theatre is haunted, and he looks at Belinda and it's just like, there is a haunted movie theatre that keeps playing movies. It's like, you can't seriously ask me to not investigate that. And it wouldn't be the Doctor if the Doctor wasn't so curious that they had to know. That's part of why the Doctor ran away with the TARDIS in the first place. In some ways, the most common and most prominent personality trait of this character. I also liked how with Ncuti you see, and this is how well it's filmed and cut as well, a lot of unspoken empathy and warmth for people who've lost loved ones. So when Tommy Lee's mum's talking about Tommy Lee, and when Reginald Pye's talking about his wife, and they're recounting and lamenting who they've lost, you get a reaction shot of the Doctor listening and taking it in, and you can immediately just feel the empathy the Doctor has, the warmth the Doctor has, the feeling of, well, I'm definitely going to help you. And it's just a look. Like, Ncuti does this so well in this episode. So many great reaction shots of him telling you so much about the story and himself just through looks, no spoken dialogue. And another thing I've noticed he did it a little bit last week, I think he's done it a bit in this episode. He's putting his hands behind his back, sometimes while talking and walking around. I said at the end of the last series, I wanted this Ncuti's Doctor to be a little bit more eccentric, and that feels like a slightly eccentric signature. You know the way like Bill Hartnell would always grab his lapels of his jacket? Mm-hmm. Keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on Ncuti. Just putting his hands behind his back. Often, sometimes he's thinking. And every Doctor always gets better in their second series. It's like, okay, he's really, really beginning to get into this character and inhabit this character now.
Yeah, he's landing it now.
And little touches like that. I mean, even it's a good line as well, but the vortex indicator, which I'm going to call a vindicator, wonderfully odd behavior from the Doctor. Typical Doctor behavior.
It's interesting, too. Popular culture, especially when it's looking in the past, it can aspire to be better, but it can't actually erase the history. So it's always such a puzzle. Way back, I want to say 1940, there was a Superman, 2-page Superman story in Look magazine. What if Superman ended the war? But the war's not over. It's interesting to have this character, this person of color, in this situation, struggling with some of those issues, but also showing how to stand up. He says, I'll shine through it all. And that's interesting and powerful, too. It's this idea of, living by example, and maybe the Doctor is lucky he can leave the setting. But it's still an interesting perspective on that kind of notion when you know that you can't magically create a 1952 America that wasn't segregated.
And I think it's important just to state that I don't think the message is people of colour need to rise above racism. We definitely don't individualize it like that. But it is clear that you think of the Doctor's experience, the breadth of experience they've had, and the timeline of experience. They are not going to mediate with racism the way someone like I would. It would be absurd to think so. And the Doctor is not a human being. So, of course, they would have different reactions. And, of course, they have a different perspective, partly because they can just live longer. There's no way they can see it the way someone like Belinda would. The thing I forgot to mention, I'm glad I'll actually mention it now. This one thing they did Russell so much better than they did in Rosa, that I hated about Rosa, was when the Doctor says, segregated diner, no blacks, and he says to Belinda, that it basically includes you, even though Belinda's not black. And I hated what they did with Yaz in Rosa. That really infuriated me. But I'm very glad they're like, look, as far as we're concerned, in this time, in this society, the way they've basically constructed whiteness more than anything else, you ain't white, so therefore you might as well be black. And the fake NYPD officer thinking she's from the Caribbean. Very, very good touch. I really like that bit. So yeah, it's all to say that I'm not going to say Ncuti's arrived as a Doctor. That's very insulting. It would be like his previous appearances didn't mean anything, and that's garbage. But every Doctor has an episode where you feel they've inhabited the character. This is Ncuti's. Very much like the cartoon Doctor becoming 3D in this episode. He feels a 3D Doctor now. It's interesting, like I haven't found out. I don't know what order this was shot in the filming schedule. Was this near the end, or was this near the beginning? If it's near the beginning, then we'll probably see more of this. If it's near the end, then maybe some of the other actual appearances and performances won't be as good, because he maybe only really, really got it down when he got to this episode. But yeah, obviously we'll see.
The only thing I was going to add, Shane, in sort of an observation, is that so far in this second series, I mean, we're only 2 episodes in, but the sort of hammering of a social message seems to have backed off a bit. It's back to being kind of subtle. I think that was one of the things that a lot of fans complained about in the first Disney series was that, oh, well, Russell's just filling all his views like a fire hose rather than making it the way I suppose Doctor Who fans always think of it, as more subtle and covert if there's a message.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't really seen much difference. But to be fair, that's obviously subjective.
I don't think there was anything that was particularly heavy-handed in the last two. Like even this, in tackling, we talked in this the last hour and a half about segregation at this time in America, and it's there, it's discussed, but it's not the crux of everything the story is about.
No, that's definitely true. That's not the leading fuel behind the episode, but because of the time and place they're set in with two characters of colour, it would be ridiculous to act like it's not there, and also partly explains why it's almost all interior and why it's almost all at night, because otherwise you probably would have to put it in a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's to the episode's detriment. Okay, so if you have any thoughts about what we've just spoken about, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. That's analysing spelt with an S. And then we are across social media at Analysing DW. So Ken and Mike, thank you for both being here.
Thank you, Shane.
As always, thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week to analyse the well. Until next time. Our logo is courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.